Because the word meditation and perhaps the concepts that go along with that word, like sitting on the floor, has been getting a lot of good publicity in the West for a while. And so it's becoming a bit popular. But the problem that they're having is that it we have to change our way of doing things in order to become successful at something that we are previously not successful at.
Mm-hmm.
An example of that, in fact, this is a story that it happened with Bhikkhu Buddhadasa when I was, let us say, a beginning new meditation student with him, basically caught in the same thing that almost all the meditation students are talking about. And that was when I said, well, there's a Western saying, when at first you don't succeed, try again. And that's basically what meditation students are doing. They're not succeeding at first, and so they try again, but they're trying and trying again is still not successful. But what Bhikkhu Buddhadasa said to me that day was, if at first you don't succeed, look at what you're doing. In other
Yeah.
words,
So
why keep trying if it's wrong? Let's figure things out.
yeah, I
Let's
mean
put
the
it
only
in.
like it. What does it say? Like it's the only thing that is dumb is like it's trying to get a different result from doing the same thing over and over again, right?
Yeah, that's one of the, I don't know who said it, but that's one of the definitions of insanity, is doing the
Yeah.
same thing over and over again, expecting new
Expect.
results.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Well, that's your average meditation student,
It's pure muscle, and yeah.
not getting the results and yet expecting that if they keep trying. One of the ways that I like to talk about it is that after 300 or 400 hours of sitting on the floor diligently doing what you were told to do or read how to do, somehow or another, the magic comma machine waffles into the room and taps you with his magic stick, and then you feel good. And a lot of people have that idea. I mean, that's the promise of all of the religions. You do good things long enough and you'll get good results.
Okay. Yeah, that sort of makes sense.
Or the other one is, oh no, you can't do anything. Who do you think you are, good? Only God is good. Oh no, you need our magic Jesus. Then you can feel good. And so everybody pays the money and takes the dip, but they
Hmm.
don't wind up feeling good. Everybody wants to feel good, and people wind up not feeling good.
So that is it's an interesting thing that you bring up. I wonder, like, it seems to me that Buddhism has a fundamental difference to all of the different religions in the sense that Christianity, but which is probably the one that I know the most because that's how I was raised. But they tell you that everyone's gonna be saved if everyone saves each other. But then Buddhism tells you everyone's saved because everyone is gonna save themselves, right? And even and the
No, Buddhism does not teach that.
oh, so
Buddhism
okay,
teaches that there is a massive number of people who are stuck in suffering, stuck in unhappiness, stuck in ordinary life, and they will live their lives, a life full of shit, and then they will die. And they will die in hope, and they will die in suffering, and they will die in misery. And that's the curse of humanity. But a few, a small number, and hopefully a growing number, will figure out that that's not the right way to do it. The way that we were raised is not the right way to live. That there's got to be a better way. So that's the first thing, is we get a different view. And as our view is purified, we've come to understand that every view that I ever held was a wrong view that kept me stuck in suffering. An example of that is Republicans are good, and so I'm a Republican. Or Democrats are good, and I'm a Democrat. So every time the Republicans win or lose, I win or lose along with them. Every time the Democrats win or lose, I win or lose all along with them. And I'm out of control. I feel according to the way that I think I should feel based upon what I'm identified with. And when I stop identifying with things, I stop having that up and down. So the idea is to come out of our beliefs. But that
So
takes a while.
so you don't have to identify with anything then.
Well, basically, there is. You could go so far as to say all of the 10,000 rules that you were taught from your childhood, including all the laws, rights, rules, rituals, hellos, ways to do things, and all of that, can be substituted for just one rule, one law, and that is the teaching of the Buddha, dukkha, dukkha nirodha. In other words, you look for and you find dissatisfaction so as to avoid it, or if you're in it, to come out of it into a state of satisfaction. That's basically the teaching of the Buddha. Dukkha, dukkha nirodha. Catch your dissatisfaction and come into a state of satisfaction. Now we can break that down into the Four Noble Truths, and we begin to see, oh, number one is that there is suffering, but number three is there is a place of not suffering.
Wait, what is number two then?
Number two is the cause of suffering. That's the big deal. Who made this mess anyway? Is the first question people ask. Whose fault is this? Who made this mess? What is the cause of suffering? And they
Ourselves, I
phrase
guess.
it in the sense of who made this mess. And basically, we're talking about it not in the sense of who made it, but who's responsible for cleaning it up. God made me, God made this mess. It's God's job to clean me up, is the way that a lot of Christians look at it. Original sin and all of that, and incapability of coming out of sin, therefore I need to be saved. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Second Noble Truth says that ain't right. That's not true. The cause of suffering is your own greed, your own ignorance, your own delusion, your own ill will. You create your own suffering. You create your own unhappiness. You create your own dissatisfaction. Which now means we've got a huge hurdle to get over. The first doubt. And the first doubt to get over is who made this mess? Who's responsible for cleaning it up? Do I get a Jesus to do it for me? How about a psychologist? Maybe a medical doctor. Or if I get really inventive, I can think my accountant is going to get me out of my mess. Or a lawyer.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in the U.S., that's what it is, right? The only problem and the only solution is money, and anything can be fixed with that, and that's the idea that they sell you desperately.
That's society. And so what you've got to do is to wake up to the fact that no, you're your own mess.
But why has it taken so, like, why, how are we so bad at this? How is it possible that humanity has been alive for such a long time, and yet
There are
we're
two
so...
things. Let me answer that with two things. One is we have a survival instinct that keeps the human body alive, regardless of how many really stupid things that person does. They generally, regardless of how klutzy we get, we don't klutz ourselves to death. At least not until after we klutz a few babies.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And that's one way of why humanity has survived. is because we have a basic, deep internal program that's listed in, or that's left in the anterior cortex of the brain, which is scientists even call it the reptilian brain. Some of my students call it the lizard brain, and that's where most people live. You see, when we were born as children, that's the only thing that we've got going, and
The lizard brain.
we tend to, especially the less educated, the less educated we are, the more likely are that we never open up the frontal cortex to real wisdom, to real knowledge, that we live on automatic pilot. And so the way that we get our children to behave themselves is by um, a promise. I promise you, if you do good, you'll get good results. And I promise you that if you do bad, we're going to get you. All right. That's the promise of Christianity. That's also the promise of the karma machine of Hinduism. Good actions lead to good results, bad actions lead to bad results. It basically is nothing but crowd control.
Yeah, for sure. It is definitely crowd control.
Right. So that's what gives us a society that is not completely anarchical. It's not completely barbaric.
Wow. Yeah, so
It's,
these
it's
religions are basically just institution of crowd control so that some people can maintain some sort of order. But that's as far as it goes. It's just crowd control.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And so when someone buys into that, they can look like and behave quite nice, quite beautiful. They even look enlightened. They're so well behaved, but inside they're a turmoil. They're not satisfied. But they think the better I behave, the more satisfied I am, and to a degree, they're correct. And so this is what gives us the quality of right view. There is first off wrong view, which would be barbarism, it would be chaos, it would be no to everything, no to mom, no to dad, no to a higher life or any of that. And then you'll have an ordinary right view that is the review of religions, which says, oh, there's a future. Oh, you have to do good now in order to get something good later. If you behave badly now, then you'll destroy the world, at least yours. All right. But now we can see that those two views, one is wrong view and one is right view. One is barbarism, the other one is society. And that humanity has worked very hard to build society. In fact, it comes out of what we would call the nesting instinct. That the humanity has made one big nest, and the rules of the nest are this: the nest is safe, but in order to be in the nest, you've got to behave yourself. You've got to do as you're told to do, or the management's going to kick you out of the nest, and then your life's going to get really dangerous. And that was true at one time when we were apes living in actual nests. But as humans, things are not quite so dangerous. But what's left over then is a residual fear. The society that we have is relatively safe, and there's no reason to go around in fear except on rare occasions. And yet people go around fearful sometimes half the day, sometimes all day long. So why do we go around in fear? Because we're in the habit of it. 100,000-year-long habit, an instinctual way of living in fear, living in rules, living in rituals. And so we raise our children that way. Now, one of the really easy ways to see this is by understanding domestic violence. Anyone who has been subjected to domestic violence when they were a child is most likely going to be involved in domestic violence when they're adult. My dad beat me. That means the right way to parent is for me to beat mine. All right.
Mhm.
Now we can take that back a step from extreme violence to a little less violence, a little less violence, and a little less violence, and find if you can teach a child how to be happy when he's a child, he'll wind up being a happy dude when he's an adult. But we don't treat our children that way. We train our children to perform, to do what they're told to do. And so the children learn to do what they're told to do reluctantly. They do what they're told to do, but they don't get much benefit out of it. Somebody else gets the benefit. Ultimately, the factory worker doesn't get much benefit from going and working in the factory, but the guy who owns the factory gets the benefit.
So you think there's some level of anarchism associated with with Buddhism then? So
Uh, uh,
because
what word did you use?
some sort of anarchism, like you're not doing as you're told to do.
I will say first off, no, and then add a star or a carrot in the sense that makes it yes. That in fact, leaving the world is anarchy, but going in and trying to fix the world, that's stupid. That really is anarchy. So leaving the world is not really anarchy. In fact, it's beginning to put some order to things because we're straightening out the anarchy that's still left in society. As bad as anarchy can get, any society that you look at in the world today is corrupt, dirty, violent, vicious, and not free from anarchy.
So there's so there do you think that there's a so can if let's say that everyone realizes this particular situation of humanity, do you think there will still be a society, or like, because if you move on from the nested
Remember, I told you that most of the people are going to not do what they need to do to come out of their ordinary state of mind into a noble state of mind. That's like saying, and I've heard this many, many years ago about Buddhist monasteries. Well, if everybody joined the monastery, if everybody became a monk or a nun, then humanity would die out. Well, the answer is, well, 2,500 years and no society has come anywhere near 10% of the people being in the what.
yeah.
So you don't have to worry about the whole crowd. The question is, can you stop worrying about the whole crowd and start figuring out what you need to do on the inside?
Good point. That is a very good point. Um,
It really is an attitude change. The attitude is no longer trying to get any benefit from the outside to gain all your benefit from the inside. The next attitude change is going to be from, can I do this or not? So the first doubt that we had was, is my problems actually fixable through the world? The answer is no. So the second doubt is, well, if the world cannot fix my problems, or there is no possibility of the world fixing my problems, no matter what I do with the world to engage it, it's not going to fix the problems. Then the second doubt is, am I capable of fixing my own problems?
so it has to be, right?
Well, no,
I mean, so
it
if you
doesn't,
can,
because I mean, we've already established that more than 90% of all humanity is not going to be able to solve their problems. So the question is, are you going to be noble? Are you going to make the change?
I mean, it seems like you can't solve your problems by looking outside. You have to be able to solve your problems by looking inside.
Or leave them unsolved and just stay miserable? That's an option. That's the option most people take. That's not an option for you, I hear. That's a good point.
I mean, no, but yeah. So I'm a biologist, right? And for me, it has come to a point where like, well, we come to existence as humans, and the interesting part of being a human is the brain. This is the beauty of
Oh, you mean that
humanity.
thing up front that we don't use much of?
Yeah, yeah, but it's very. I guess it gets to the core. Like the purpose of life as a human is being as human as you can possibly be, and the most human thing is to use your brain. So yeah, I guess it makes. I mean, there's to me there's nothing else
Now
to
you
do
sound
except.
like you're giving my Dhamma talk for me.
I mean, well, I know, I don't know. It's
Yes, you do. You figured that out. Why, if we are really human, do we act most of the time like a reptile?
yeah,
The
it's
answer is because it's easier to operate like a reptile. We started out that way. We do
yeah.
use the frontal cortex, but not nearly as often as we ought to. And so we wind up living a lizard's life.
So okay, so do you so you did said that it's crazy to try to fix other people.
Without the proper skills and without having already the knowledge and vision and wisdom of having fixed your
Oh,
own life,
so there
then
was a
I would
start
say
there too.
no, right. It's like a broken machine trying to fix another broken machine that's broken differently.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So you can fix other people, but it's just hard.
Actually, with all of the many years of teaching that I have done, I don't think I've ever fixed anybody, but I've shown a lot of people how to fix themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the main thing, right? I guess that's all you can do. People show them the door, but they have to walk through it.
No, they have to walk through it 10,000 times, and that's a, a conservative estimate.
So so
Once I
you're
show them the door, they have to keep finding that door for themselves and keep going in, keep going in, keep going in. This is the quality of sati, the Pali word that is generally translated into English as the word mindfulness. But actually the word sati, S-A-T-I, which is actually part of Anapanasati, is part of the Satipatthana, the four foundations of mindfulness. It's a path factor in the Eightfold Noble Path, Right Noble Sati, and it's part of many other collections, including the factors of enlightenment, Sati. And what we mean by that is to remember. Now, here's what's going on. We are habit bound. Anytime that you operate through habit, then you're taking the old way of doing it. Sometimes the old way of doing it is so natural we don't even see a fork in the road. We just naturally go down that left path. Sati is to be capable of remembering to look, because you may not want to go down that left path. You didn't until recently even know that there was a right hand turn or a door, as you're saying.
Mhm.
And so as you go throughout life, we need to keep remembering to not do the way that we normally do and change to choose to do something different, which basically means stop thinking the thoughts that you've been thinking and start thinking some new thoughts. Stop feeling the way that you used to feel and start feeling a new way. And then a few minutes later, you go back and feel the old way, and then sati will happen, which means you wake up. And your waking up then will be, oh, I don't have to feel bad. I can feel good instead. Basically, is to remember that you've got a choice. Ultimately, the entire path of the Buddha can be referred to as satipanya, to remember to take the wise way out, to remember to do the wise thing. Satipanya. But we also have satipatthana, and the patthana means the foundations, like the word pedestal, patthana, the word or footing. The foundation of who you are is based upon the body, the feelings, the mind, along with the brain, and the kind of thoughts or the contents of the mind. This actually comes from the old elements from long before we knew that there were 92 or more, that they had only four elements, and that was earth, water, fire, and air. And so we relate earth with body, water with emotion or feeling, mind with fire, and the contents of the mind like air, like your thoughts are merely clouds in the sky. And in that regard, you are not your thoughts. You're not even the mind itself. In fact, you're not even the feelings, and you're not the body. A lot of people think they are the body. In fact, that belief system, I am the body, gives rise to a number of industries: cosmetic industry, clothing industry, the health industry, biologists. All of them fit under the qualification of people in general throughout the world think of it as I am the body. So the girls will put on makeup thinking that this makeup, this paint job that I'm putting on is me.
But what you're saying is that we are all four?
No, I'm saying we're not any of those four. You are not the body.
Nor the emotions, nor the mind, nor the contents of the mind.
No, you're not any of those things. Who are you or what are you? You are a sequence of events that gives rise to either altruism or selfishness. It leads to either suffering or no suffering. The process then, if you go into suffering, it's a me that suffers. And so that's who you are. You're something that can suffer. But if you're not suffering, there's no me there, or not much of one.
Wait, so once you get, I guess that's when people get rid of the self, because if there's no
You
self,
can't,
then there's nothing to suffer.
basically, when you're not selfish, then you're not suffering.
Interesting. Interesting. So we're a process, and that process is either altruism or selfishness.
Mm-hmm.
And then the selfishness, that's when there's suffering. But if you do the altruism, then there's no
Then
suffering.
there's no suffering. Okay. So let me give you this example, a very easy example. We're not going to go deeply into it, but we can at least talk about it like this. Your brother, a good friend, a family member, someone close, comes and wants to borrow money, substantial, $100, maybe $300, $500. Let's put it up there. Your brother comes and wants to borrow $500. If we say, I don't have it or I can't give it to you, then automatically both of you feel bad. But if the brother comes and asks for $500 and you say, sure, I've got $500, I've got it laying around, and you give him the $500, then both of you wind up feeling good. He's happy to get the money. He's happy that you're friendly with him, and you're happy to be so generous and wealthy that you can afford to give him the $500. So what is your choice? To keep the money and everybody feel bad, or to give the money and everybody feel good?
Yeah, but you're also postponing the feeling bad because maybe that money was meant for you to eat, right? And then now you'll be
See,
hungry.
see the selfishness. Don't you see it?
Well, okay, fair enough. But also this altruism, but that's no different from any other religion.
Except that nobody teaches people to practice that. They just leave it at the level of it's a good idea.
But that's a problem of practice, not ideology.
Well, if you don't practice your ideology, then what value is the ideology?
Right, but if you're a perfect Christian and then you're altruistic, then then you're
Are you
also
saying
happy.
that are you saying that it's impossible for a Christian to be happy? I'm just saying in general it doesn't work.
Okay. So,
So
okay.
you're creating a fantasy place, and yes, some Christians can find themselves in that fantasy position. They can, in fact, practice the teachings of Jesus, but very few preachers in America, and very few preachers who are associated with politicians, teach Christianity that is associated with the teachings of Jesus. What you're talking about, altruism, taking care of the good Samaritan, feeding the poor, taking care of people do feel really good when they're altruistic. And a few Christians do that. But most Christians in the United States are taught, uh, oh, things are dangerous. You're losing your place. Those black people, those brown people, those immigrants, they're taking your jobs and everything is going downhill. Come vote for us. And that's Christianity. It is not altruism.
Okay. So, but at some level, altruism is also a form of crowd control.
Can be. And some people will look at it from that benefit. An example of that would be the wealthy giving politicians money so that they can control the thing. Yes, a lot of altruism is seed money.
Hmm.
And in fact, as far as compassion goes, that's what you would call pity. The kind of pity that you take pity on someone. And what that means is that, oh, that person hurt so bad, let me give him a little money so I feel better. In other words, it's not really altruistic, it's still selfish. And it's really hard to not be selfish.
But at some level, the altruism, if it's making you feel good, then it's also being selfish, right?
Well, um, let's not work too far into that because you're getting into this situation. There is the story about the mouse who used a thorn to remove the thorn that was stuck in the lion's paw. To use a thorn to pull out a thorn. You can see that concept, all right? So,
Uh,
in this regard, there is a certain kind of selfishness that is very valuable, very altruistic, and does not lead to suffering. So, let's not get too wrapped up in what self is. And I know that the West has just gone bonkers with that. That that's not the real issue. The real issue is, in fact, is there a magical soul or not? The word in Buddhism that is called atta and anatta. The Buddha taught anatta, which meant there was no soul, no perpetual thing, something that was permanent. Now, there's another way of looking at it, and that is that upon the breakup of the body, the death and breakup of the body will be the annihilation of the existing self. Now, that kind of belief is called annihilationism, and is different from eternalism because in the eternalism, that soul lives on and on, But in we can even use the word atheism or annihilation is that the self is annihilated at the point of death. Within the teaching of the Buddha, we say, oh no, the death of the body's death is its own thing, but this self arises and passes away depending upon the circumstances, and when it arises, it's sure to cause trouble. It arises and passes away according to conditions.
Yeah, but
Yeah, but
I mean, that's like thinking about the end of life. I don't think it's very useful, right? Or is
oh,
it's
you're going to
this?
just die by accident. You're not going to have any choice or any say in the matter. You're just going to ignore the whole thing until and then you die.
Yeah, I mean, so there's. I don't think it's useful to think in the afterlife, I guess.
Well, I can believe that because there's nothing to think about. It's only stories.
Right.
But you see people dying all the time. Death is real.
Oh, for sure. I mean, life's only promise is death.
Yes, you're going to die.
For sure.
You ought to get ready for it so that you can handle it brilliantly.
Yeah, is that what I think I've heard that like that's life is the preparation for the moment that you die from some philosophy.
That's a little bit overboard. But if you can get ready for death now so that you can say, I don't care, I can handle that. In fact, I welcome death. And that the older you get and the more infirmed you get, the sicker and older you get, then shouldn't you be more and more willing to see death? Young people, they don't want anything to do with death because they've got a life to live. Well, what happens when you've lived your life? Are you still going to cling to it? I didn't do it enough. And so this is a bit much for our first conversation, but we'll get into this in depth soon enough. But
Okay.
the whole point is for you to become free from all of your suffering, including from fear of death. If you can become free from fear of death, then what is there worth fearing about? And then, in fact, most fear that people have throughout their society, even though they're nowhere near death, their major fear is fear of death. An example of that is a 14-year-old kid. He sees the bully and his two friends coming down the hall, and what does he do? He panics and he becomes afraid. He becomes fearful, and his mannerisms show his fear. And the bully can pick up on that. Bullies don't pick on lions. They don't pick on strong students. They don't pick on people who will laugh at him. They pick on the weaklings. Who is weak? The one who is consumed by fear. Well, most people are quite fearful.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that I've realized, that fear is not useful at all. It just hinders your senses and it makes you do stupid decisions. Like it's good to be cautious, but not but fear is
But caution can be done with wisdom.
right, for sure.
Can be
Absolutely.
can be done by looking at what you're doing.
Exactly.
Where fear is actually not looking at what you're doing. Fear is shutdown mode. They call it a freeze state.
Yeah. Yeah, no, fear is not a good idea.
All right. So if you can become completely fearless, then that is a real kind of a freedom. You can really begin to enjoy your life if you're not afraid of death. You could go drive the money changers out of the temple or do something really useful with your life.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
So real freedom has a value to it, and that real freedom comes from freedom of fear, which means it's basically wanting to stay alive is an instinctual mechanism, and if we can manage it correctly, we can be very happy. But if we let that instinct manage us, then we wind up being full of fear, trepidation, and don't take the opportunities that are afforded us. So now that we've gotten that, we can say, well, basically what we need to do is to figure out what we need to do in order to change the way that we feel about things. That's really what meditation is all about when we practice it correctly, is to change the way that we think and to change the way that we feel. And that we do it every time we remember to do it. That's where sati comes in. So now we begin to look at the Eightfold Noble Path, because in fact we've already been talking about it. And that the part of the path that I want to look at with you is right view, right sati, right effort, right attitude that leads to right noble unification of mind. And when we have right noble unification of mind, then our behavior and our speech is automatically noble because our mind is noble. But you see, the precepts are taught upside down. The Buddhist religion operates just like all of the other religions in that regard. In other words, we teach our children to behave by following the rules. But with the noble way of teaching, we don't care about morality in the beginning so much, but that it becomes purified as the mind becomes purified.
So what do you care at the beginning then?
Well, in the beginning, you're left with the rules, because in the beginning, all people start at the regular level, not in the noble level. At some point in your life, you have to come off of the ordinary path onto the noble path. And that noble path starts with right noble view. So in fact, in that regard, there are actually two paths. I could go so far as to say there are three. And the third path is after someone has actually done the path. Only then will they really know the path, is after they've done it.
So that's when people say like your second path, third path, fourth path.
Don't get any of that. That's not part of the Buddhist teaching. That's something that Chuladasa made up, and I think that he got it from something out of the 3rd or 4th century. Okay. So let's not go there.
Okay.
Let's stay with what the Buddha taught.
Okay.
All right. I don't even know what all of that means, and neither does any of the students. I think that they mean jhana. But in that regard, what I'm talking about is ordinary people start off in an ordinary path. And sometime along the way, they begin to see things in a noble way, and that becomes the process of converting off of the ordinary path onto the noble path. Once they become extraordinarily experienced at that path, finally they begin to understand it completely. But along the way, there's a time that it comes when we change the path, but we've got to start someplace. So right view becomes right noble view. Right effort becomes right noble effort. Right sati becomes right noble sati, and right attitude becomes right noble attitude.
So what is the shift? What is the noble adds?
Pardon?
What does the noble add to each of these parts of the path?
There's some noise here in the yard, and so I'm not hearing you correctly.
So what does the noble add to the path?
Are you asking me what is the right noble attitude?
No, what does noble means in all of this
What does the word noble mean?
Yeah.
The word noble you can think of as high quality, honorable. We have English language words like honorable, and that they use them in politics and in judges. They call the judge your honor. Most judges, though, are not honorable men. They're supposed to be, but they're not. So the kind of honor that a judge should be when they call him your honor, that's what I mean by noble. We can also think of it as a statesman, is a politician who has gotten just so fed up with politics that now all he wants is for the right thing to happen. And so he's always above politics. We can also think of this as above the world. The noble is not in the world, he's above the world. This is what we mean by, some translators use the word transcendent, but that sounds way too Christian. Another word would be supramundane. In other words, it's above the mundane. Now, I would put natural and supernatural both in the mundane. The supernatural world, the world of magic, the world of superstition, the world of belief systems, the world of religion is ordinary worldly stuff, because ordinary worldly people have all of that kind of stuff in their mind, and they're not noble.
So how do you achieve nobleness?
One step at a time.
Okay.
And in fact, every time you become noble, in that moment you are noble. And then when you step out of that nobility, you're no longer noble. So it's not a matter of how do one become noble as if it were a permanent state, but how do I become noble in this moment? And then how do I maintain this moment? That this is a major, major change in the way that a dominant or a noble student will think, is we stop thinking about the past and the future. We stop thinking about enlightenment as something out there, and start realizing that enlightenment is something that happens right here in this moment, or it doesn't ever happen. It's not something that's going to happen in the future. Everything that happens has to happen right now.
It seems very frugal then.
Pardon?
It seems very frugal.
Frugal. Yes. Cheap Charlie. Cheap Charlies who are very noble, they don't go shopping. Why? Because there's nothing to buy. They don't need anything. They're completely satisfied. So they don't go shopping much. They don't go out much. There's nothing to do, no place to go. Everything is happy.
That's an interesting thing. That's an interesting way of thinking. Nothing to do, nowhere to go because everywhere is happy. So
right, enjoy your happiness. But for you, it's only a concept because you haven't developed that joy yet. You're still in the habits that you took on when you were a child, and all children that I've ever seen want to feel bad instead of good. So you have to keep reminding the child, oh, you should be happy now.
Well, yeah, but you're taught that there has to be a reason for you to be happy.
Yeah, right? Manufacture it. Yeah, what's the reason? You feel good because you want to feel good. Here's an example of that. It's called the lottery, or the one that I know of was on television years ago. Ed McMahon, who used to work for Johnny Carson, after the Carson show finished, the night show, Ed McMahon started working for Publishers Clearinghouse, and what his advertisement was that it was this con game for old people You get enough of our magazines, you'll win our lottery, and the $10 million check will come. And everybody's really happy when they, wouldn't you be happy if you got a $10 million check?
Probably. Yeah.
Guess what? The people who get those windfalls wind up having a worse life in about 3 years.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yes, it's so important, in fact, that the lotteries have stopped giving complete windfall lotteries, and they'll stretch it out over 20 years because people wind up having a disaster with that windfall. For one thing, you've got more relatives now than you used to. You've got IRS agents at the door. You've got casinos that are trying to grab you and take you to town. There's the car salesman sitting on your couch. In other words, everybody wants your money, and now you've got to work really hard to keep it because everybody there thinks it's valuable. But the thought of getting $10 million brought a smile to your face. Your thoughts control your feelings. And it's not the outside world that makes you feel good. It's always on the inside. The thought of $10 million actually makes you feel better than the actual $10 million.
So, okay, what about using alternative ways of feeling good? Like, because I think I've talked with people like, okay, under that particular thesis, then if you are in heroin all day every day, you're helping yourself manufacture happiness, so you're technically fulfilling that particular premise,
Did you
right?
use the word harem in the harem all day?
Heroin.
Huh?
Heroin.
Heroin?
Yeah.
Same thing. Harem and heroin are the same thing.
Okay.
Why? Because you're hoping that something on the outside is going to make you feel good, and you feel good for a short time. But heroin is extraordinarily addictive, and people who do heroin wind up feeling really bad.
Fair enough.
And heroin and harems are only on the outside. The question is, can you bring heroin and the harem on to the inside of your mind? So how would you like to feel if you were in the harem?
Uh, yeah, that would be. I mean, that would be good.
All right. Now, in this harem, let us say that there's 10 women, all dressed in harem clothing, and there's 11 guys.
Uh-huh.
How do you feel with the other 10 guys in the room, all of them getting one, and you don't get one?
Yeah, that would be very bad.
All right. So what's the point about a harem? Harems can get real.
Yeah.
Harems, people get killed in harems. That what you're looking at is the greed. And you're thinking, oh, if I get my greed satisfied, I'll feel good.
Momentarily, I guess. Now that I think about it, but not forever. But I guess
Okay.
forever doesn't mean anything because it has to be now. So yeah, but the timing issue is really interesting because it's perpetually now. Yeah. I don't know. I think I have to go to sleep because it's 1 a.m. here and I have to go to work
Okay.
tomorrow. But this was very, very useful. So
We
you, so
ain't
you,
done nothing yet. That's by
well,
the way one of my Buddhist jokes. You ain't seen nothing yet.
Well, then I'll see something at a later time then.
All right, let's do that. But since we haven't really even talked about practice, there's nothing for you to practice. And I understand that this is just a beginner kind of thing, just getting introduced. Next time you call, we'll actually talk about how to start putting some of the things we've talked about today actually in practice. We'll
Okay.
introduce Anapanasati.
Okay. Yeah. I took some notes. I need to because I really don't know anything. So I'll read up on all of terms, and then yeah, we can talk about specific practices. Because yeah, because
You might
that's
you might want to review this video recording that we've just made also.
oh okay. Sounds good.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry for that, but I did, and I do this with almost every student, and that is we have to turn things upside down. And that's what we've been doing today is beginning to turn everything upside down.
Yeah, for sure. No, I really like it's the, the different way of thinking of about these things. Um, okay. Well, yeah. So you're basically available
I'm generally around the
starting.
computer during daylight hours.
Okay. And any like Monday through Sunday.
I don't have days of the week. Western people do that. I don't have calendars. I don't have a watch. I don't have a clock. I don't use cell phones. But I do Skype when they call if I'm
Okay.
around.
Okay. So if
No,
the sun is
no
up,
schedule, nothing to worry about.
okay. So if the sun is up, you will probably be around.
All right. Couple of days will do.
Okay.
Couple and in a couple of days, call in a couple of 3 days. You can begin to put what we've been talking about today in incorporating it into whatever you've been doing as a practice of meditation. And next time we'll get into more detail about what to do.
Okay.
But the important thing is for you to start concentrating on, or let us say, remembering that it's okay for you to feel really good.
Okay.
To start,
That is
start practicing feeling good. Start practicing giving yourself happy thoughts.
okay. That is an interesting way of. That is an interesting assignment. I like it. I I like it. Okay.
Surprise
So
of the Buddha is not something I invented.
allow yourself to be very happy.
Yes. Not allow, make it happen.
Make make yourself be very happy.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Sounds good. Yeah. I can call you in a couple days, and then we can start digging into some specific practices. That makes sense.
Excellent. Excellent.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thank you so much. I'll see you later.
All righty. Bye
Bye.
bye.